Hey everybody, this is Nate from Geezer Skate, and I'm here with my good friend Al Coker at the Texas Skateboarding Museum. And in this episode, we're going to talk Sims.
No, not the game that's, the video game, but Sims Skateboards from Tom Sims. Surfer, and, there's Mad Dog. Here we go. Well, yeah, Tom Sims, pioneer of skateboarding, huge pioneer of snowboarding, and surfer. And the weird thing is that he has a huge connection to Dallas because he was hired by Don Singer of Don Nell Distributors, who were one of the biggest distributors of skateboarding equipment, in the late 70s and through the 80s. I had the great pleasure of working with Don and Elaine and their son Stuart and their daughter Shay. They're like family to me. And anyway, Don was hired by DFW Airport, which was in its infancy, to fix the people movers, which were they were like futuristic, trains that were running from terminal to terminal. And he came upon the idea of this urethane wheel, and Tom Sims happened to be making urethane wheels. And so all of a sudden, hey, my son skateboards. Well, hey, I'm doing skateboard wheels. So all of a sudden, Don and Elaine had the inside track on the Sims wheels. And so the first ones we got, and for a long time, were unbranded. They were just that ruby red. And we had, the original, we'd get prototypes, we'd get all different kinds of stuff. So when we hear people talking about it, like, oh, this is OG and that's OG and stuff, it's funny because, again, for a long time, and we also had Sims wheels before they were actually sealed bearings. So they were all ball bearings. And as you know, Road Rider, or may not know, Road Rider came out with the first sealed bearing, the Road Rider II, which was this little microscopic thing. As a matter of fact, skaters of this era and say the late 90s and early 2000s with what I call bearing cover sized wheels would probably really like the Road Rider II, except that they were squishy. But all of a sudden, Sims had to retool and go to sealed bearings. So, instead of having these giant, vats of ball bearings and having to put together ball bearing skateboards, which is an art in and of itself, we had the old drill press and we were pressing sealed bearings into the wheels. So, for me, Sims has always been, we always had the first Sims boards, we always had, prototypes that got sent, and I probably rode more Sims skateboards. Like this is a really old Sims. When it says speed wheels, that means, it's original. You can see this has like no kicktail, no nothing. Made out of birch, not oak. As you can see, it's gigantically wide. This must be all of 5.5 inches wide and about 26 inches. Might have been 27 inches when it started out, but it's about 23 or 24 now. But I rode this thing in swimming pools and all kinds of different stuff. And, maybe it's a travesty to have Road Riders on it, but it's, I might have ridden Road Riders here and there too, just because there wasn't grip tape. Originally, it just came with clear resin with a little bit of sand in it to give you grip. And that was sort of they did that sort of trick too with fiberglass boards. They would do the texture to give you a little bit of grip. This board, the Sims Stratoglass, came in 27 and 30 inch, and I'm proud to say we do have a 30 as well. But these boards were both $29.95, and sales tax back then was a nickel. So I can tell you, $31.45 is forever etched into my brain. We would put together 40 or 50 of these things in the morning, go to the shop in the mall, and they would usually be gone by the evening. So we were flying out the door with skateboards. At the skateboard shop, no longer in existence, but it always lived in my mind. And then, the next big jump for everyone would have been the Kicktail. Now you notice this is just a wedge that is attached to the board. You know, it's just a wedge. It's not bent because this is an oak board, and these oak Sims Kicktails were like a big upgrade. And then grip tape, like grip tape was a big thing. Usually came back millions of years ago when the earth was still cooling. It came in little strips, and you'd get these little strips. You can see where I stuck them on here and stuff. There weren't like solid sheets for a while. And then the next sort of evolution, and his boards were amazing. This is a taper kick. And the Sims taper kick had a bent wood kicktail. And I still think this is one of the prettiest boards ever made. These are just, now they're works of art, right? But I don't know if Nate can pan over. You can see one of my original riders up there on the right at the top. That's a 30-inch taper kick. That's a 36, and the other one was a 27. This buddy skated a lot of stuff, and I'm amazed. And this was one of our inventions. The art class, hey, cut this thing out, put it on. We sold the hell out of these tail blocks, right? You could see how it wore off. And the screws made a great sound when they hit too. But we hadn't really realized you could countersink stuff. We were just learning as you go. There wasn't any technology that was specific to skateboards for a long time. The cool thing about the taper kick is that it continued to evolve as boards got wider. It's like the Big Bang hit, right, with urethane wheels. Then trucks got better. All of a sudden you had a Bennett, then you had a Tracker. And then a while later, you had a Gullwing, and then you had, last person to the dance was Indy. But taper kicks went all the way up to 10 inches. And there was a 9-inch variety. This is when, like I said, boards sort of sprung up in 1977. They got a little wider. 78, it was like the Big Bang. And, by 79, we had, in 77 and 78, we started getting ply boards. Which is what we're familiar with now, which is what 99.9% of all boards now are just 7-ply, da-da-da-da-da. It's always the same, right? Maple. But again, these ply boards supplanted the taper kick because the taper kick was obviously more expensive to manufacture. And the wood plies and everything were very light. You tried to do an oak board or something like this wide, and bend the kicktail, it just wouldn't work. So, he had a stable of riders that was unbelievable when you think about it. You had George Orton, you had Greg Ayres, you had Wally Inouye, you had Brad Bowman. And that was, sort of that first wave of people, Dave Andrecht. I mean, it goes on and on. I've got him right behind here, and I really, Mike Fulmer out of Florida, amazing rider. Bergen Marr. I mean, these guys were among the very best that have ever skated, and they certainly were at the top of the game in the late 70s into the early 80s. And then all of a sudden, what freaking thing about Sims would be complete without Lonnie Toft? God, super nice guy, and I don't think anybody's ever ridden an 8-wheeler better. And if you have not ridden an 8-wheeler, you need to realize it's not easy. And especially not easy riding pools and parks and things like that. You have to go from side to side. You literally have to move your feet on it like a surfboard, because it's so wide and you jump. You can't be on this side trying to turn that way. So you got to go from each side, treat it like it's two skateboards strapped together. Well, we used to ride the heck out of this thing. This is actually Mad Dog's, and we would share boards a lot because you just didn't need to have everything of all things. But you've got Lonnie Top 10, Lonnie Top 8. Now this board has an interesting plan shape and everything. It's probably better for another story. But if you take a tracing of this and put it on the original, first Zorlak that Jeff Newton did, and the second Zorlak, which was my payment for the name, it happens to be this shape. Now, I'm not saying it's a copy. I'm just saying this was an innovative, really wide shape, but this board's not even 9 inches wide. Okay, but this was when it was just starting, and like it blew up, and all of a sudden here we have 10, and it says 10 inches, but actually like 10 and a half. So this is another Lonnie Toft. I love the sticker job on this one. So Lonnie Toft was an amazing rider for Sims, and probably his riding for Sims was what he was best known for. And he was a huge innovator in terms of the things he did, but also he rode all different kinds of equipment, and just a heck of a guy. I mean, he's a great skater, great guy. Not always the case, right? They're just like all people are different. Early 80s, and then all of a sudden, Alan Gelfin came along, and the ollie became the thing, right? And so, there was, like I said, a continuing new wave of, like all of a sudden, it wasn't just restricted to how high you could go by grabbing the board and doing an air or a hand plant, which later became the invert, right? All of a sudden, it's no hands. Look, Ma, no hands, right? And some of the people that took Look, Ma, no hands to the nth degree was Lester Kasai. Lester was super stoked because, Sims had a real team. They had the great red and white jerseys, which Tunnel had them too, but Tunnel had a great team. But the Sims, when I think of the red and white and blue jersey, I think of Sims. I mean, that's maybe, although I never had one. All my buddies did, but I never did. But anyway, Lester, one of my favorite skaters, and his splat is sort of emblematic of all of a sudden where, boards were pretty much logos. And then all of a sudden skaters went, what, I want to have something on here besides, maybe my name. And, you saw this transition. These are 70s, early 80s. And then all of a sudden, like in 82, you got this, which is still his name, but all of a sudden, hey, there's a graphic here. And that was the graphic explosion that hit. I think we could thank Powell for that to some degree. And obviously, Wes Humpton. He was the first one to sort of not make it just about a name. And that was, Dogtown Skates and all that stuff. But it was the explosion in the early 80s where all of a sudden you had color. Like, oh, bang, zoom. It doesn't have to just be the wood with a name on it. And, I think we're better for it. And, coming from Texas, it's a little later than these guys, but than Lester and everything, but he was a contemporary to some degree, is, our own Jeff Phillips rode for Sims. Now, I think it was in 84-ish that Sims really, I think, wanted to go concentrate on snowboarding, and, he licensed the Sims name to Brad Dorfman of Vision. And then Vision also did, Vision had great riders, had great, Vision streetwear, which is a little later. But you had a guy that became the biggest manufacturer of skateboards. He did the first Schmidt sticks, all these different things. Paul Schmidt went out to California from Florida. Instead of just making rails and a few boards, Schmidt sticks became, an industry standard. And thank you, Dr. Schmidt. So anyway, but our own Jeff Phillips, he had his super brief pro model, like blink your eye and it was gone, on Gordon and Smith. But Sims is really his first graphic. This is the multi-dimensional one, but the first one's just a flat one, which we do have in the museum. And we also had the tie-dye demon, which is even more of Jeff's personality when you think about it. This one's got a great, someone had fun here. I love boards that have a story. And I don't know this one specifically, but it had to be a good one, right? This was a loved skateboard. They had a lot of great graphics. And when you go, like later in the 80s, Kevin Staub, which I thought his boards, this series, I thought were fantastic. And, you got to love that. The other thing, it's way later, but, I don't know if anybody knows about pirate radio in England, where the BBC was the only channel. It would only play music if it was already a hit. So they didn't have commercial radio. So out in the English Channel, on trawlers and on forts that were built to fight the Nazis in World War II, there were all these pirate radio stations that played. That's where lots of bands got their first airplay. So I just love that because it kind of reminds me of that. I'm not sure what the connection was in terms of the Union Jack, but this is Flagship I. Originally came out without a concave, which, you know, the concave was a big deal, right? Now, when we say concave, I mean, you got to really stretch to call that a concave. I mean, and this is a big, deep concave by this time. But anyway, this is Flagship II, which I've always thought was kind of interesting. And then, I don't know, this one, people didn't really dig this board that much, but I just always thought this was kind of surfboardy, reminiscent of, Nate brought up TNC. And I've always liked this graphic. And I've had this board a long time. Definitely not a rider. But again, I mean, look at this gigantic concave. Now this one, unlike the other one, has a little bit of concave going into the tail. So, you know, we're making progress. And you know what? I always like this stab too. I mean, is this the crazy, insane clown? Now, I think John Lucero might have done this graphic. I gotta look that up, but I think he did. Another great artist. I mean, skater, but just, you know, skater artist. It's kind of amazing. And these would have been done, like all the ones that I'm showing you in bright, vivid color, those are all really manufactured by Vision. And what Sim's presentation would be complete without Christian Hosoi? He was like an embryo when he was writing this. I mean, he was really little. There's some pretty famous pictures of him, I guess, in the Brown Bowl at Upland. Was it Upland? Yeah, anyway, that of him writing this. And there's an ad in one of the first Thrashers, like in 82 or 83, of him riding this board. Now, Sims, after Hosoi left, continued to make this kamikaze, they called it after that, or people called it the kamikaze. Anyway, they continued to make it because it is a pretty striking graphic. And then when they did reissues, they did it in a bunch of weird colors like black and pink and things like that, which I thought were kind of funky. When you see Sims E glass, right here we have the Sims E, and this is clear pizza grip, which is kind of amazing. Pizza grip literally is stuff that will tear your hands and thumbs. We always had a permanent like slices in your hands from it, because it's like I don't know what the grit number would be for a belt sander, but that's sort of like what it is. You can take wood down to bare wood in about one swipe with a belt sander with it, or take off your face or something. But the E stands for epoxy glass. So what we have in the layers of fiber, in the layers of maple, is fiberglass resin to make it stronger and stiffer and lighter. So the glue layups would make it last longer. And Bill Castor, Castor surfboards, but famous for Castor skateboards as well, he really sort of pioneered that. And really hit Castor boards, you see them thousands of years later. The reason they're still around is, I think, by and large, having that fiberglass inserted. But again, almost forgot the Hosoi thing here. I felt really bad. Maybe it's my prejudice, but I'm sort of partial to these late 70s, like getting any taper kick, whether it's the 10 inch is going to be a whipping to find, but getting a taper kick is kind of, I think, a great place to start a Sims collection, just because it was so much a part of the evolution. And then my second that I would look at would be getting something that is an Andrecht, because Dave Andrecht and Brad Bowman, but I mean, you got, you have that amazing sort of triumvirate of these boards, Lamar and Andrecht. These are from the 70s and 80s. I think I'd try to get one of those somewhere in that range next. I think that would be a good place. And then you know, just get your wallet out.